Linda is the author of 2 books about the assistant industry, including my absolute favourite title of all time, Sitting on a Filing Cabinet Naked with a Gun. It's brilliant. Linda also teaches and trains assistants all over the world. And Linda is going to talk to us today about building resilience in times of change. But I wanted to ask you, to get the conversation rolling, what you think is the most important aspect of resilience for assistants and why it's so important in the role?
Well, I've found over the years in my experience that part of resiliency is being able to bounce back. That in our role, things change so much, and you just never know. The calendar that was that evening before, when it's the next day, it's completely different. Business changes quickly, and our resiliency is super important to be able to bounce back and to come up with the ideas that we need in the instant we need it, and to just kind of be buoyant, I think is the right word.
Yeah, I think now more than ever it's something that's important for us. There's been so many changes in the assistant profession, just moving to working away from your executive. We've faced so many changes. How have you found it where you are? I know that you are also, some people don't realise that you still are, despite being an author and a trainer and having a packed schedule, you work as an assistant as well. So how have you found it? What's changed for you?
Yeah, I do. I support 2 executives and I work full time. So I feel like I kind of have my finger on the pulse on what's going on. And what I've learned is, as soon as the whole event happened, and probably many of you realize this, for us in California, we were completely shut down. And I went from juggling a travel schedule and expenses and ordering food and just managing a lot of events to kind of a standstill. And my job changed significantly. And that's when I thought I need to figure out how I can still be of value to the company, to the executives, to our team, and what my strengths were. And it's the importance of being resilient and figuring out, what are my strengths and what are my attributes and how can I contribute to this changing world, and what's different and where can I help my executives improve.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's that flexibility, isn't it? I was talking with an assistant during the week and we discussed it in the panel session actually. Sherwin Weber made a really great point that it's amazing how many assistants were able to cope so well with the pandemic and just very quickly changing because we're so used to being flexible and kind of just bending and swaying with things that just need to be done and having that, as you said, that being able to bounce back from I guess not just problems but also just that constant change. Take scheduling for example, schedule everything for one day and then before you know it it's all been changed and you have to completely start again. So it's that ability to bounce back is so important, and I would imagine has been incredibly valuable for assistants in the last
Yeah.
year.
And just being able to control it and not let it control you, and having that kind of that bigger picture of how can I get ahead of it, or how can I learn the technology that I need, and what what can I do to contribute. And I think one of the things I realized is I really wasn't that familiar with SharePoint, and we had moved to Teams, and we had a lot of things going on. And since I had a little bit of extra time, I worked on kind of a site for our travel and for our finance team, so that we had one place to go. It was something that nobody had really taken on before. So it's realizing what are the different things you can do, not only to improve yourself, but to also make it better and easier for everyone around you. So it might not be just that scheduling, it could be a lot of other things that might be going on, and just being aware, having that awareness.
Yeah, definitely. It'd be great to hear from some of our attendees in the chat if they let us know some of the things that how they've had to pivot in the last year and where they've been adding value in their organisations that they might not have even thought of in the last year or like previous years. Be great to hear any examples that you guys have. While we're waiting for those to come through, I just want to touch on a point you just made there about being self-aware. I wonder how important you think that is for assistants now
I
and
think,
going forward.
yeah, I think being self-aware is it's really critical, and understanding what your strengths are. And for instance, like I said, SharePoint, I didn't have it wasn't one of my strengths. And instead of relying so much on everybody else, I I decided that I was going to learn how to process it, how to work it. I found out it was pretty easy, and here I was a little bit afraid of it. And I think in times of change, that fear factor kicks in. We get a little, off our feet, and it can blindside us. So being self-aware and understanding who you are and what makes you tick, and also when things are going wrong, being aware of how you're reacting to it. I found that if I ask myself questions, that it really helps me process it better and become aware of what's going on around me. I might ask them, why am I feeling this way? Or why is there this fear? What's causing it? I think when you ask yourself questions, helps you get to the bottom of it and pinpoint it better.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that I talk about a lot with assistants. It's being curious, isn't it? It's having that, not with a whole manner of things, with yourself, with your executive. I often say one of the challenges that assistants have is not asking questions, because we tell ourselves quite often that we have to be perfect and we have to know everything and be the kind of source of information. We don't ask those questions that are so key to the role and finding out things. So, would you agree with that? Is that something that you've encountered before?
Yes. I mean, let's face it, we're humans. We all make mistakes. I'll never forget a time, you figure I'm going to double check it, triple check it, I'll get it right. There was this one specific time that really stands out in my mind. I had a board meeting and it was offsite, and I made a mistake. And here was the mistake: the restaurant was closed at the time, and we were going to be having meetings in the restaurant during the lunch hour, and the executives were expecting to be served lunch. And when I got there, I realized as everybody was gathering, the hostess said to me, "Oh, we close at lunchtime." And we had used the restaurant, or this hotel before. So how could this be? How could it be closed? It's never been closed before. And what had happened is there was kind of a downturn going on, and they decided that the best for them was to close during the lunch hour. Well, I hadn't double checked that. And I think that's when you realize how resilient you can be and how you can think on your feet. And I was lucky enough that I consulted the contact there. I gave her some ideas. Could you ask the chef if he could maybe do a modified menu for us? And then there's no servers. And so let's just say, from all of this going on, and within a 5-minute time frame, we came up with a plan with the chef. And I remember approaching my boss, and he looked at me like, oh, I was coming to give him some important information. Yeah, the important information was, guess what? I'm your server today. And so I think, being assistants, we have to be resilient in how we approach things. And it worked out. We had our meetings, they had their lunch, but I'm not perfect. We make mistakes. And I think the most important thing is that we own them, and that we've come up with solutions that we can make it better, and that we take responsibility for it.
Yeah, in honor of sharing mistakes, I'll have to share my worst one. I was working for an insurance company, and we were in the process of losing a client, a really big client that we had. And my executive had actually, this was kind of January, but over Christmas he'd actually flown to the States to go and convince this client to stay with us. And the client had said, well, look, let's get Christmas and New Year over with, and then I'll come to the London office and meet with you, and I'll make a final decision. So it was a huge meeting. A lot of effort had gone into it, and the client had arrived at our office, And as these things happen, receptionist had called me and said, the client is here, he's waiting in the office. And obviously, as the EA, my job was to go down and collect him and then bring him to my executive's office. And just as I was about to leave my desk, somebody came over to ask me something, and I completely forgot that the client was sat in the reception. I shouldn't lie, this was a few years ago, but it was such an awful mistake because I left him there for about 15 minutes and he was not happy that I basically forgot about him, and there was no coming back from it. There was no new plan. I couldn't blame anybody. I just simply forgotten. So I apologized profusely. It was so bad. I apologized profusely. I took him up to the office. My exec was like just giving me daggers. And really the only reason I wasn't fired was because I had quite a good relationship with my executive and had built up, this was the one huge mistake I'd made, and it was a case of like, look, you've not done anything this bad before, I'll have to let it go. But sometimes when you do make those big mistakes, actually falling back on the relationship that you've built with your executive is the thing that saves you. So
and it's also seeing how resilient they might be too.
For sure, yeah. Sometimes you just have to say sorry.
I was brand new at a job and my boss was supposed to sit on a panel. And I said to him, it was only like my second week. And I said, what do I need to do to prepare you? He said, hey, don't worry about it, Linda. I do these all the time. It's all set. So in my gut, I felt like there was something missing that I needed to do, like reconfirm everything, something. And he ended up showing up at the panel. And guess what? They were not expecting him because nobody had acknowledged that he was going to come or not. And I was horrified. And he came back and he said, oh, don't worry about it, Linda. They just put another chair up there for me. And we went on as if nothing ever happened. But those are the times when you feel like that was my responsibility. That was my mistake. That's on me. And I think we just need to be resilient in how we approach it and apologize profusely and just learn a lesson that, okay, I need to double check those things. I shouldn't rely on him telling me there's nothing you need to do. Just go on with your day. So.
Yeah, and I laugh about it now. At the time I was mortified, and I must admit there was a little bit of crying in the toilet later that day. But a sense of humor again is just so important when it comes to resilience, isn't it? And just having that a little bit of thicker skin and grit about you. A sense of humor goes a long way.
I think a sense of humor is a lot. And there's something else. I had a boss that he was pretty intense. He can be very intense. And there was this one particular day that I think my self-esteem was this big. It was just so bad. I just felt like I just wasn't on it, and I was just not doing well. And I could tell he was feeling a little, well, at least my vibe was he was getting a little like, what's up with you today? So I remember I went in the bathroom. We had this long mirror, and I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called the Wonder Woman pose. And I literally stood in front of the mirror for I guess it was about 2 minutes. I put my hands on my waist in that Wonder Woman pose, and I said a lot of positive things about myself because I really needed to get back in sync with being productive. And I have to tell you that thank heaven nobody walked in the restroom when I was doing that. But when I got back to my desk, it really helped. And I think we need to find these, I guess I call them coping strategies to help us cope with it. Maybe you went for a walk. We have to kind of take ourselves away from the moment too, to help us keep resilient and be confident again.
Or were able to salvage it. I have to say that we did keep the client, and I think that made a huge difference to the way that my executive reacted. I think if he had left and joined another company, then I think the outcome would have been quite different. So I was very lucky that we had managed to schmooze the client into submission. Thank goodness.
But it also shows how much we get interrupted, and sometimes how we have to really always be looking at things around us and in those coping strategies. And luckily you remembered him in 15 minutes and not an hour later when,
Goodness.
I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it could have been a lot worse.
It could have been a lot worse. Yeah.
Um, I was going to say, in the sense of community and sharing, if anybody else wants to share their mistakes, then please feel free
And
on the
just
chat to
know
let
we've
us know.
confessed.
It
We all
feels
make
very
mistakes.
confessional.
We all make mistakes.
Um, we've been talking a little bit about managing emotions, and I just wondered if you had any more. You mentioned there about moving away and removing yourself from the situation and just regrouping. But I wondered, I mean, obviously at the moment, last year, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better in that sense. We're all dealing with emotions that we never thought that we would have, and it
Yeah.
seems like
Yeah.
there's just, even now, there's just a low level of anxiety that we all still, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but it still feels like it's quite far away. This anxiety, I think I certainly feel it. I don't know if you do, but it just constant kind of low level anxiety every day about when things are going to get better. So I
Yeah.
wondered if
Oh,
you had any
it's like
tips or,
Groundhog Day, right? We're doing the
yeah,
same
it's
thing.
exactly like Groundhog
Yeah.
Day. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if we can keep our sense of humor, but when you have those emotional outbursts or you're feeling like it's on the edge, I really have found that if I am self-aware and I realize I'm getting to that place, that's probably the most important thing, is that you recognize it's happening. And then it's when you ask yourself, like, where is this coming from? And like I was saying before, it's a lot about keeping yourself in check. As assistants, it's really important that we remain calm and that we also stand up for ourselves. I know there have been times where I think I've surprised executives because I've worked for some that can be some tyrants. And I remember one in particular. I heard that in the past he would send a lot of people to the restroom to have a good cry. And I think it really surprised him one day when he was at my desk and blasting me for something that, and not waiting for an explanation. And he walked into his office as if, hey, I'm done. She's done for the day. She's toast. And lo and behold, I was right behind him as he entered his office. And I said, hey, that was not okay. And you haven't given me a chance to give you the other side of the story, because there are two scenarios and there's a way that we can get to it. So I think we have to control our emotions in the sense that being aware and also having the confidence and courage to stand up for ourselves when we need to. And I don't mean yell right back. I mean, in a productive way. Like, for instance, for that, he was so shocked that I followed him into his office because he was sure that he said anybody else I would have said that to would have been in the restroom crying. And I said, well, I just need you to know that behavior is not okay. And that it's not productive for what we need to get done. And and it helped our relationship, and it also gave me the respect from him. So there are times that we also need to be resilient in that way and take care of ourselves and make sure we're heard.
Well, that's really, yeah, that's so important. We were talking about this a little bit yesterday in the summit with Peggy Vasquez, and our assistants will see that later this afternoon. And she made a really good point, which was, when you are working with difficult executives, or as she said, different executives, different to you, it's also
Yes.
about having respect for yourself, but also having respect for the role. And in your example, he wasn't respecting you, and he wasn't expecting respecting your role and
Yes.
what the value is that you bring to, the value that assistants bring to the office. Would you agree with that? And I wonder if one of the reasons that you were able to do that is because you respect yourself and you respect the role.
Yes, I respect myself. I respect the role. And sometimes executives don't really understand the value that we can bring. We're there to protect their schedule, more importantly, their time, and their different personalities, and us having to adapt to the way they work more so than the way we work. And every executive, you have to figure out what their hot buttons are And when those hot buttons are touched, how you respond and how you um, appear in the role as professional, or are you going to be shouting back at them? And I think for us, we need to be always remembering that we have to train them on the importance of the role. We have to help them understand our skills and our value and what we bring to the table. Maybe they've had an assistant in the past that hasn't had that same skill set. So, helping them understand, for instance, if you have an executive who's old school and maybe you're techie, how are you going to adapt to be able to help that person? Or vice versa. Maybe they're more techie than you are, and how are you going to scale and manage up so that you can be resilient in getting things done?
Yeah, I think we're kind of coming to the end of our time, which is a shame because I could talk to you all day about about the job. There's still a lot of change to come this year. I think a lot of us are thinking potentially there's going to be a downturn in economies across the globe, and we're all kind of wondering what that's going to entail and how that's going to impact us. And then of course there's a lot of change around where we're going to be working from, if we're going to be back in
Mhm.
offices, if there's going to be some kind of hybrid situation. So I wondered if you could give us some tips on, well, firstly, if you have any updates on what's going to happen where you are, or if you've got any thoughts about the future of the role, and then how assistants can thrive at the moment in this such uncertain times.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to always be fine tuning your skills, making sure that you're staying relevant. Don't become complacent with kind of the same old routine. Look for different ways to make yourself stand out. It can be small things. It doesn't have to be, reinventing a program. It could be small things and just maybe the way you process something. I think for me, the hard part about all of this unknown is losing our confidence. And I think the importance of confidence can be undervalued, and having confidence is really important. And I know there have been times when I don't have that confidence. So I would encourage you to look to friends and colleagues and mentors, especially in times where you're feeling vulnerable, and reach out to them and talk to them to find out how can you add value. Maybe they see the importance that you bring, or the values or skill sets that you have that you might be blindsided by because of that fear or that unknown. And I found that sometimes my mentors and friends understand me better than I do at the moment, and they can give me tips on how to do that. So seek out mentors and people that will help you believe in yourself again.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. As an aside, I ran a webinar at the beginning of the week where we talked about how assistants can work more strategically, and we spoke about one of the challenges being that sometimes it's simply due to a lack of confidence and not seeing how much value you actually bring to the role because you're not confident in yourself. And I pulled up a list of characteristics that really described what it means to work in partnership with your executive and do work that's considered strategic. And the amount of assistants on the webinar that were shocked when they saw that and said, I do all of that. I just didn't really put two and two together where I was strategic or I'm adding that much value. And that then contributes to the bottom line of the business. And I said, it's so much down to confidence. And actually, when you step away from it and somebody tells you that, exactly as you said, doing those things, it's amazing just to get that confirmation from somebody else. It can really boost you.
Yeah. I mean, it might be improving just a little process that saves everybody time. And I think some of the strategies when we talk about coping mechanisms or ways to help you during this difficult time, if you can just if you see it coming and you can start planning, so you can start brainstorming on what can I do, how can I spin this as in a positive way, how can I visualize it, and coping is different for everyone. So being very aware of what that is that you might need to do to help yourself in change, and adapting in ways that you can say, where can I add value? And maybe it's somewhere else that you haven't thought of before.
Yeah. Well, Linda, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute
My
pleasure
pleasure.
talking to you. I hope everybody, I'm sure everybody has got a copy of the books that you've written, but if not, I know they're available on Amazon and all other good online bookstores. So thank you so much for joining us.